Our little house on Willow Creek Lane was our happy place. My wife, Sarah, and I had bought it a few years ago, and we loved everything about it. The small garden in the back where we grew tomatoes and peppers, the cozy living room where we watched movies on rainy days, and the friendly neighbors who always waved hello. It was a quiet, peaceful life, exactly what we wanted. Before the whole HOA Karen incident, our biggest concern was whether the squirrels would get to the tomatoes before we did. We enjoyed weekend barbecues with friends, walks in the nearby park, and the occasional board game night. The homeowners association was usually pretty quiet, just sending out newsletters about lawn maintenance and the annual neighborhood picnic. We paid our dues, followed the rules, and generally kept to ourselves. Little did we know that peaceful existence was about to be hilariously disrupted. I worked from home as a software developer, and Sarah was a 911 dispatcher for the county. We were both pretty laid-back people, not easily bothered by much. But this HOA Karen was about to test our patience in ways we never imagined. The sun was shining, and I was just settling into my workday when I heard a sharp knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the peephole. Standing there was a woman I'd never seen before, but she definitely had that official look about her. She was wearing a bright floral dress that seemed a little too fancy for a Tuesday morning, and she had a clipboard clutched in her hand like a weapon. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, and her sunglasses were perched on top of her head, giving her a slightly intimidating appearance. I opened the door, and she immediately launched into her spiel. "Good morning," she said, her voice a little too loud for the quiet neighborhood. "I'm Brenda, and I'm with the Homeowners Association. I need to inspect your backyard." I raised an eyebrow, a little surprised. We'd never had an inspection before, and certainly not without any prior notice. "Inspect my backyard? What for?" I asked, trying to keep my tone polite. Brenda puffed out her chest and adjusted her sunglasses. "We've received a complaint about the height of your hedges," she said, her voice dripping with authority. "I need to see if they comply with HOA regulations." "I'm sorry, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "but I'm not comfortable with you just walking into my backyard without any prior notice. We didn't receive any notification about an inspection." Brenda's face tightened. "Well, I'm here now," she said, tapping her clipboard impatiently. "And I need to do my job. It'll only take a few minutes." "I understand that," I replied, "but I'd really prefer it if you scheduled an appointment or at least gave us a heads up. I'm working from home and I'm in the middle of something important." Brenda huffed and rolled her eyes. "Look," she said, her voice rising slightly, "I don't have time for this. I have other houses to inspect. Either you let me in or I'm going to have to report you for noncompliance." I stood my ground. "I'm not refusing to comply," I said firmly. "I'm just asking for a little courtesy. A simple phone call or email would have been sufficient." Brenda's face was now red with frustration. "Fine," she snapped. "If that's how you want to play it, then that's how we'll play it. You'll be hearing from the HOA." She turned on her heel and stomped back towards the sidewalk, muttering something about uncooperative residents. I watched Brenda march to her car, a small SUV that was far too big for just one person. She fumbled in her purse for a moment, then pulled out her phone. I figured she was probably calling the HOA president or something, complaining about my uncooperative behavior. But then I saw her face get really serious and she started talking into the phone in a very deliberate, almost theatrical voice. "Yes, hello," she said, loud enough for me to hear even from my porch. "I'd like to report a disturbance. I'm at 123 Willow Creek Lane and the homeowner is refusing to allow me access to their property. I'm a representative of the Homeowners Association and I have a right to inspect their backyard. He's being very obstructive and threatening." I couldn't believe my ears. Threatening? I hadn't even raised my voice. She was really going for it. A small smile crept across my face. This was getting ridiculous. She was actually calling the police because I wouldn't let her into my backyard without an appointment. I shook my head and went back inside, wondering how long it would take for the cops to arrive. This was going to be interesting. I settled back into my work, but I couldn't really concentrate. The thought of Brenda out there, waiting for the police, was just too funny. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see a whole SWAT team descending on our little house. I wasn't really worried, though. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I was on my own property, and I had every right to refuse someone entry, especially without prior notice. Still, a tiny part of me was a little concerned. What if the police took Brenda's side? What if they tried to force me to let her in? I knew the law was on my side, but sometimes things didn't always go as they should. I decided to text Sarah and give her a heads up. Hey, just so you know, the HOA Karen is calling the cops on me because I won't let her inspect our hedges. LOL. Might be a squad car showing up soon. I added a laughing emoji, trying to downplay the situation. She replied almost immediately, seriously? What is wrong with people? I'm on duty now. What's the address? I sent her our address and she replied with a simple, okay. I had no idea what she was planning, but I felt a little better knowing she was in the loop. The minutes ticked by slowly as I worked, the anticipation building with each passing car that drove down our street. I started imagining what the officer would say and how I'd calmly explain the situation. Now, let's switch gears and see what Sarah was up to at the dispatch center. It was a typical Tuesday for her, phones ringing off the hook, radios crackling with activity, and a constant stream of information flowing in and out. Sarah loved her job even though it could be stressful at times. She had a calm demeanor and a knack for staying cool under pressure, which was essential in her line of work. Her desk was a carefully organized chaos of paperwork, computer monitors, and headsets. A half-eaten sandwich set next to a large mug of coffee, evidence of a quick lunch break. On the wall, a handwritten sign read, "Keep calm and dispatch on." Sarah took pride in helping people, whether it was directing paramedics to an accident scene or calming down a frantic caller reporting a break-in. She was a lifeline for many people in the county, and she took that responsibility seriously. Little did she know her next call would involve her own home and a very persistent HOA representative. She answered calls quickly and efficiently, directing officers and ambulances with precision. The phone rang again, and Sarah answered in her usual professional tone, "911, what's your emergency?" On the other end, she heard a slightly breathless and overly dramatic voice. "Yes, hello," the woman said, "I'd like to report a disturbance. I'm at 123 Willow Creek Lane, and the homeowner is refusing to allow me access to their property." Sarah's ears perked up. 123 Willow Creek Lane? That was her address. She quickly glanced at the caller ID, but it was blocked. "Okay, ma'am," she said, carefully keeping her voice neutral. "Can you tell me more about what's happening?" The woman on the other end proceeded to launch into a lengthy and somewhat exaggerated account of the situation, complete with accusations of obstruction and, of course, the claim that she was a representative of the homeowners association. Sarah listened patiently, trying to suppress a smile. It was becoming increasingly clear that this was the HOA Karen her husband had texted her about. She couldn't believe it. Of all the calls she could have received, this one had to be about her own backyard hedges. The irony was almost too much to handle. Sarah bit back a laugh as Brenda continued her tirade. The audacity of this woman calling the police over some hedges. It was almost too ridiculous to be true. She could picture her husband standing on the porch, trying to maintain his composure while this Karen ranted and raved. A wave of annoyance washed over her. She dealt with real emergencies every day, car accidents, house fires, medical crises, and here was someone wasting her time and the resources of the police department over a petty HOA dispute. But beneath the annoyance, there was a strong undercurrent of amusement. The situation was so absurd, so perfectly ironic, that she couldn't help but find it funny. She knew her husband could handle himself, and she trusted him to explain the situation calmly to the responding officer. Still, she couldn't resist the urge to play along just a little bit. She cleared her throat and continued to take down the details of Brenda's complaint, all the while trying to keep a straight face. This was going to be a story they would be laughing about for years to come. "Okay, ma'am," Sarah said, once Brenda had finally finished her dramatic retelling of the hedge incident. "I'm going to dispatch an officer to your location to investigate. Can I get your name and a description of yourself?" Brenda, clearly pleased that she was finally being taken seriously, puffed out her chest again, even though Sarah couldn't see her. "My name is Brenda Miller, and I'm wearing a floral dress and sunglasses on my head. I'm standing next to a small, gray SUV. Sarah typed the information into the system, carefully noting all the details. She made sure to mark the call as a low-priority, non-emergency situation. She wasn't about to pull an officer away from a real crisis to deal with a hedge dispute. She assigned the call to Officer Johnson, who she knew had a good sense of humor and wouldn't take Brenda's complaints too seriously. As she dispatched the officer, she added a little note to the call, "Homeowner's wife is the dispatcher. Possible HOA dispute." She couldn't wait to hear what happened when Officer Johnson arrived on the scene. This was definitely going to be the most interesting call she'd taken all day. She smiled to herself, imagining the look on Brenda's face when she realized who she was talking to. "Back at my house, I saw a police car pull up to the curb." Brenda practically skipped over to the car, her floral dress billowing in the wind. She started animatedly talking to the officer, pointing towards our house and waving her arms around. I took a deep breath and walked out to meet them. Officer Johnson stepped out of the car, a tall, friendly-looking man with a neatly trimmed mustache. He gave me a polite nod. "Good morning, sir," he said. "I'm Officer Johnson. I received a call about a disturbance here." Brenda immediately jumped in, her voice shrill. "Yes, officer. This man is refusing to let me inspect his property. I'm with the Homeowners Association and I have a right to be here." Officer Johnson held up a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, please. Let me hear the homeowner's side of the story." He turned his attention back to me, his expression calm and professional. "Sir, can you explain what's going on?" I took another deep breath and began to calmly explain the situation, starting with Brenda's unannounced arrival and my request for a scheduled appointment. I made sure to emphasize that I wasn't refusing to comply with HOA regulations but simply asking for a little courtesy. Officer Johnson listened patiently, nodding occasionally as I spoke. He seemed to be taking everything in, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he turned to Brenda. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have any documentation showing that you notified the homeowner about this inspection in advance?" Brenda sputtered, her face turning red. "Well, no," she admitted, "but I'm with the HOA. I don't need to give notice." Officer Johnson raised an eyebrow. "Actually, ma'am," he said, "it's generally considered good practice to provide residents with reasonable notice before entering their property, even for HOA inspections. It's a matter of courtesy and respect." He paused for a moment, then added, "Also, I was just talking to the dispatcher about this call and she mentioned that she's actually the homeowner's wife." Brenda's jaw dropped. She looked from Officer Johnson to me, then back again, her eyes wide with disbelief. The color drained from her face and she suddenly looked much smaller and less imposing. The silence was thick with tension, broken only by the chirping of birds in the nearby trees. It was a truly priceless moment. Officer Johnson, seeing Brenda's stunned silence, turned back to me with a slight smirk. "So, sir," he said, "it sounds like there's been a bit of a misunderstanding here. The HOA would like to inspect your hedges, but you'd prefer they give you some advance notice. Is that correct?" I nodded. "Exactly," I replied. "I'm happy to cooperate, but I just want to be given a little heads up." Officer Johnson turned back to Brenda, his voice firm but polite. "Ma'am," he said, "I understand you're trying to do your job, but it's important to respect people's property and privacy. In the future, please make sure to provide residents with adequate notice before attempting to enter their property. It'll save everyone a lot of trouble." Brenda mumbled something about uncooperative residents under her breath, but she didn't argue. Officer Johnson gave me a reassuring nod. "All right, sir," he said, "I think we're all set here. Just try to work things out with the HOA, and if you have any further issues, don't hesitate to call us." He turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, I think it's best if you move along now." Brenda, looking defeated, slowly walked back to her SUV and drove away. Officer Johnson turned to me, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Well, that was interesting," he said, chuckling. "Your wife seems like a great lady. She definitely has a good sense of humor." I laughed. "Yeah, she's pretty awesome," I said. "I'm sure she got a kick out of this whole thing." Officer Johnson shook his head. "You have no idea," he said, still smiling. "She was practically bursting with laughter when she told me about the call. She said to tell you to trim those hedges." He winked and then headed back to his patrol car. As he drove away, I couldn't help but laugh. The whole situation was just so absurd. I walked back inside, eager to tell Sarah all about it. I knew she was probably still at work, but I couldn't wait to hear her side of the story and share a good laugh. This was definitely a day we would never forget. The HOA Karen had unintentionally provided us with some seriously good entertainment. That evening, Sarah came home from work, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Oh my gosh," she said, bursting into laughter as soon as she walked through the door. "That was the most ridiculous call I've ever taken." I grinned and launched into my retelling of the events, exaggerating Brenda's dramatic performance and Officer Johnson's amused reaction. We spent the next hour laughing and comparing notes, piecing together the whole hilarious story from our different perspectives. Sarah told me how she had tried to keep a straight face while Brenda was ranting and how she had discreetly alerted Officer Johnson to the situation. I told her about Brenda's shocked expression when Officer Johnson revealed that I was married to the dispatcher. We agreed that it was a moment we would never forget. Before we went to bed, I went outside and trimmed the hedges just to be on the safe side. The HOA Karen might be defeated, but I wasn't taking any chances. Plus, Sarah really did want them trimmed. In the days that followed, things went back to normal, but with a few notable differences. Brenda seemed to be actively avoiding us whenever we were outside. If she saw us, she would quickly turn and walk in the other direction or duck into her car. It was almost comical. The HOA, however, became strangely accommodating. We started receiving emails about upcoming meetings and events, and our suggestions were suddenly being taken seriously. It was as if they were trying to make up for Brenda's behavior. We also became minor celebrities in the neighborhood. People would stop us on the street to ask about the HOA Karen incident, and everyone seemed to have a similar story about dealing with unreasonable HOA demands. It turned out that our little incident had resonated with a lot of people. We even received a few anonymous gifts, a pair of hedge trimmers, a gift certificate to a local nursery, and a handwritten note that simply said, "Thank you for standing up to the HOA." It was a strange and unexpected outcome, but we weren't complaining. Our peaceful life on Willow Creek Lane had been slightly disrupted, but it had also become a lot more interesting. Looking back on it, the whole HOA Karen incident was a bizarre but ultimately harmless experience. It taught us a few things about community, communication, and the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even if it's just about the height of your hedges. It also gave us a pretty great story to tell at parties. More importantly, it reinforced how lucky we were to have each other. Sarah's quick thinking and sense of humor turned a potentially stressful situation into a hilarious anecdote. And my willingness to stand my ground even when faced with an overzealous HOA representative showed that we were a team ready to support each other no matter what. So, the next time you're faced with a neighborhood dispute or an unreasonable demand, remember our story. Stay calm, be polite, and never underestimate the power of a good sense of humor. And who knows, maybe your wife is a 911 dispatcher too. I think the biggest change was in how we approached the HOA in general. Before, we just went along with everything, never questioning anything. But after the Brenda incident, we started paying closer attention to the rules and regulations, and we weren't afraid to speak up when we thought something was unfair or unreasonable. We even started attending HOA meetings, much to the surprise and probably dismay of some of the other residents. We realized that being part of a community meant more than just paying your dues and mowing your lawn. It meant being engaged, being informed, and being willing to work together to make things better for everyone. And while we still appreciated our peaceful life on Willow Creek Lane, we were now determined to be active participants in shaping our community, one hedge trim and HOA meeting at a time. It just goes to show, sometimes the most unexpected events can lead to positive changes. And it all started with an HOA Karen and a wife who was a 911 dispatcher. Our experience highlights the importance of community. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in our own lives and forget that we're all in this together. Whether it's dealing with an overbearing HOA or simply lending a helping hand to a neighbor in need, being part of a community means supporting each other and working together to create a better place to live. It also underscores the value of communication. Had Brenda simply called or emailed us to schedule the inspection, the whole incident could have been avoided. A little bit of courtesy and respect can go a long way in preventing misunderstandings and conflicts. And finally, it reminds us to never take ourselves too seriously. Life is too short to get worked up over petty disagreements and trivial matters. Sometimes it's best to just laugh it off and move on. After all, who knows what hilarious adventures await us around the corner. Maybe we'll find out the squirrels are running for HOA president. Now that would be a story. And that's the story of how an HOA Karen, a 911 dispatcher, and a slightly overgrown hedge brought a little bit of excitement and a whole lot of laughter to our quiet life on Willow Creek Lane. It's a reminder that even the most mundane situations can turn into something extraordinary, and that sometimes the best way to deal with life's little challenges is with a smile and a good sense of humor. We learned that being part of a community is about more than just following the rules. It's about connecting with people, standing up for what you believe in, and finding the humor in everyday life. So, keep your hedges trimmed, or don't, we're not judging, be kind to your neighbors, and always remember that even a call to 911 can have a funny side. You never know when your wife might be the one answering the phone. Thanks for listening to our story. We hope it brought a smile to your face.